Well, welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Jeanine Parolini, the MBA Program Director here for Bethel University. And joining me today is Jackie Bolt. She's our MBA Administrative Assistant with Bethel University. So we're excited to have you here. We're looking at a webinar on integrating emotional and cultural intelligence. There is a ton of research and literature on emotional intelligence and quite a bit also on cultural intelligence. But no one has really investigated the connection between the two areas of emotional and cultural intelligence and how they affect and how they function together. And so that's what we're going to be looking at today. And historically, emotional intelligence has been known to really impact one's career and be very important in having a successful career. Well, guess what? Today, cultural intelligence is just as important to our career success. So that's why we're looking at both of these skills. We're going to be recording this video. However, your name and your face will be anonymous, so no worries there. But we have some folks who'd like to get a copy of it. So thank you for coming today. Jackie, go ahead and go to the next slide. All right. So, well, I guess those are the same slides. So anyway. So I just wanted to share a little bit. I've really been researching cultural intelligence almost all my life, believe it or not. I grew up in a very poor neighborhood in the inner city of Chicago. It was very close to the Cabrini Green neighborhood, which is known as, at one time was known as a very, very poor inner city Chicago neighborhood. My parents were poor. They never owned a home. My dad had a business doing accounting, and he mostly catered to immigrants coming into the university, coming into Chicago that wanted to start their businesses. And so we had a lot of different kinds of people in our home, you know, because of our family business. And I started working for my dad at about 7 to 8 years old. So between our neighborhood and between, you know, my dad's business, I had the opportunity to meet and connect with a lot of different types of people. And it's amazing because my dad actually became kind of a father to these immigrants who were trying to start business and be successful in the United States. So it was kind of an exciting adventure to be part of at a very young age. And then since then, I I got into a business career doing strategic consulting and sales, worked with clients like Granger and Crate and Barrel. Those are probably some well-known companies. And then owned and operated a couple of businesses myself, doing corporate training and personal executive coaching. I've worked in leadership and personal development for 2 large nonprofits. And here now I am in academics and just really enjoying investing in our students here at Bethel, and you as well, whether you're a student or alumni or a friend of Bethel. It's exciting to be able to invest in you today. Related to my emotional intelligence, that's been a tougher journey. That journey probably started about 30 years ago when I had an encounter with God. And since then, I've probably worked for about 25 years researching the topic. I was very intrigued by the topic. I struggled with emotional intelligence. You know, I still do. I'm still working on it. It's kind of amazing to me because I've been considered an expert in the field of emotional intelligence, but I had to work so hard to develop it and grow it, and I'm still working on it. And I hope that that can be an encouragement to you, because it's possible not only develop your cultural intelligence, but your emotional intelligence at the same time. And so I want to encourage you that both of these we can develop. They're not just born in us. So I've had an opportunity to speak quite a bit on emotional intelligence as well as cultural intelligence. I've had an opportunity to write a couple different chapters on emotional intelligence. And in the book I wrote and some other articles I wrote, I've very much included both of these topics. So you can go ahead and go on to the next slide, Jackie. Thanks. So we're going to, our agenda today is to really define emotional intelligence and cultural intelligence, talk about the bridge between the two, and then figure out ways to practically apply them to our personal and our professional lives. And the reason we do these webinars at Bethel is because our purpose is really to develop you. So yes, we develop our students. We still like to develop and invest in our alumni. And if you're a friend of Bethel or just in or outside of the Bethel community, we care about you. We want to invest in you. So today is something we do for professionals that are interested in this topic. So all are welcome, and we're glad that you're here. At the MBA's purpose is to develop people professionally, intellectually, personally, because a better person, better leader and manager, ethically and spiritually. And so, of course, this webinar really connects with that goal. And if you are interested in learning more about the Bethel MBA, I did put our one of our information videos in the chat, so feel free to pick that up if you'd like. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. So what we're going to do today is there'll be some points where I'll just be asking you some questions and, just really putting those out there for reflection. But if you want to comment in the chat about in response to that question, go ahead. And then Jackie will just try to watch that for us and bring in your comment here and there. And then if you have any questions along the way, just put them in the Q&A. I may try to get to those too along the way, but I know we're going to pause at a point. And then definitely do some major Q&A. So I hope that helps, and that we've got prizes at the end. And so Jackie will be picking our prize winners too. So anyway, here we go into the topic. Let's go to the next slide. So as I was mentioning, I've done a lot of work on emotional intelligence, personally and professionally. And I've studied all the different writers and researchers on this. And I would just like to make the definition of emotional intelligence very simple for you, because it is going to get more complicated as we start to bring it into cultural intelligence. So emotional intelligence really boils down to two things. It's self-awareness. So the intrapersonal part of myself, I need to be aware of what's happening inside of me. And one of the reasons I need to be aware of that is because what's happening in me does affect other people. We all work with someone who we know when they're cranky or crabby, because whatever's going on inside of them, everybody else around the office can feel. And sometimes, even if you're not in an office, but you're working online, you can feel it through the internet lines. So what's happening within us, that self-awareness, is very important to be aware of. And then the other part of it is the self-regulation. So that's the interpersonal. So that's what happens between myself and other people. And so it's between us. And so my ability to regulate my emotions is helpful in my relationships with other people. So why is emotional intelligence important? Well, it's hard to get a hold of how we're impacting others unless we're aware of ourselves. And just even start to think about that around culturally. It's really hard to be aware of how our culture, how we impact others without really being aware of what's going on with us. And when we're aware of what's going on with us, then we can start to regulate and observe and, adjust the impact that we're having. There's also a theory called emotional contagion. And it talks about how our emotions impact others. So emotions are really contagious. And I know, I struggle to this day with when someone else is feeling emotional, it impacts me. It's hard for me to just stay separate from that. And so that's how we are as human beings. Some of us are better at that than others, but our emotions impact others, and the emotions of others impact us. And so that's why we want to be aware of our own self-awareness and our self-regulation. So now we're just going to do a check-in poll, and nobody's going to know what you said, so you can be honest here. So Jackie, why don't you go on to that poll that we've got where, just for us to be considering, like, how aware are we of what we're thinking, feeling, choosing, and doing throughout the day? I am aware of that. I strongly disagree. I'm not aware of it. I disagree. I'm not aware of it. I'm not sure. So I neither agree or disagree. I think I'm aware, so I agree. And then I know I'm really aware, so I strongly agree. So let's see how we come out. We'll give it another 20 seconds because it looks like we have some folks who haven't had a chance to answer yet. Okay, so it looks like we have 30% of us that strongly agree that we are aware of how we're feeling, how we're thinking, what we're choosing, what we're doing throughout our day. That's great. I wasn't always that in touch with myself. I actually had to put some things in my calendar at times to check in with myself because I was so tuned into what was happening with others. So 30%, great. And then we've got about half of us that agree. So that's kind of normal, where yeah, we are, but we could probably get better at this. And then 10% of us are not too sure. And then there's, we've got someone who's, really struggling here. And that's okay. I'm glad you're here. So we can go ahead and end that poll, Jackie. And, I guess we'll share the results. There we go. So that's what that looks like. All right, so you can go ahead and go on to poll 2, Jackie. Now we're going to think about, so based on our awareness of ourselves, how am I able to regulate my thoughts, my feelings, my choices, and my behaviors throughout the day? So, as you're taking this poll, I want you to think about it, think about how am I able to regulate my sadness? How am I at regulating hurt? My fear or anxiety that kind of tries to clip at me during the day, anger, joy, excitement. Sometimes, I'm a pretty passionate person, and sometimes I have to curb that a little bit because not everybody in the room is feeling that way. So how capable are we of, adjusting and regulating those emotions throughout our day? All those different kinds of emotions that we can feel as human beings. Okay, we'll go ahead. We can hit end the poll, Jackie, and then show those results. And then hit share results. Okay, there we go. All right, so now you can see this too with us. So we've got 4% that strongly agree. Isn't that interesting how we had more people who were self-aware, but then fewer that strongly agreed that regulating it. So regulating it is not for sissies, it's hard work. And I think we're seeing that in our results. And about 76% of us agree. So that means we see some areas where we can grow to regulate those emotions. And then, 12% of us, we're kind of in the middle. We're not sure about that one. We kind of neither agree or disagree. We're still trying to figure that one out. And then about 8% of us disagree. So a couple of us, we're struggling with regulating. And I really appreciate you being transparent about that because it's not easy. This world is really, it's a more difficult place than ever. And, it's hard sometimes to regulate the feelings that are going on. So we can go ahead and stop sharing. All right, and then we can go on to that next slide. Let's see, I'll just close that and then stop sharing. There we go. All right, so thank you so much for looking at that openly. That really helps us now as we start to talk about some statistics around EI. So I want you to be aware of the importance of emotional intelligence in our lives. So first of all, for quite some time, organizations have been recruiting for it. You'll see them test you in interviews and promoting it. EI is positively related to organizational citizenship behavior. So that means that people that are really aligned and connected to the organization, they tend to have EI, and companies know that. That's why they want it. And it's also negatively related to counterproductive work behavior. So it's likely that somebody who's got EI is going to have very productive work behavior. Somebody who doesn't they might be a little more counterproductive. They might be doing a little self-sabotaging, and maybe they're not even aware of it. Higher EI relates to higher job satisfaction. So that's exciting too, because we're aware of what we like, what makes us feel purposeful and passionate, and we're aware of what doesn't. So we probably tend to steer more towards the jobs that we're going to enjoy. And then we can go on to that next slide, Jackie. Thank you. So here's some more stats for you. EI regulates positive affect. So that means that more of that positive attitude, the positive tone that comes off of us, EI regulates that. That makes a lot of sense. And then positive affect contributes to creativity. So that's important. You know, I found in my life, like I have to make sure I change my environment that I'm working in to keep myself positive and also to boost my creativity. I have to do a lot of creative problem solving in this role. And so when I kind of move myself around to environments that encourage me, then I'm a lot more creative. And so the EI helps us regulate that. Many studies have proposed that EI contributes to leadership ability and team ability. So being a good teammate, being a good leader, agile leadership, so a flexible leadership style, able to adjust as the moments require. EI helps with, regulating stress, helps us to be engaged. Again, our productivity, our resilience, our ability to bounce back. We've really been challenged in that over the past, 3 to 4 years. And so EI helps regulate that. It helps with our well-being and our relationship successes. So you can begin to see how the relationship skills associated with EI, when you look at some of these skills that we're talking about here, you can begin to see, oh yeah, I could see where that could contribute to my cultural relational ability too. Okay, let's look at some more stats, Jackie, and go on to that next slide. Thank you. So then we see too that EI contributes to career advancement. So companies are tending to promote people that appear to have EI. It helps us to manage the politics in the organization, and politics is not a bad thing. Politics is really the managing of resources. So I know we react sometimes to that word. It's a tough word. It's a tough topic, but the politics of the organization have to do with acquiring and distributing resources and the conflicts that come around that. And so we want to be able to manage those things. That's going to be a natural part of work life. It also helps us to manage the interpersonal aspects of work life. And okay, check this out. If there's a good reason to have EI, it's because there's more pay related to it. So more pay. That's interesting. And then notice this one too, because this also connects with our cultural intelligences. EI contributes to cross-cultural adjustments, especially for those expatriates. So that's really interesting. We can begin to see the connection right there. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Now I want to tell you a little bit more about why it's so important to have EI, because a lack of it can actually relate to failure. And listen to some of these statistics that I found, because you may be experiencing some of them or have experienced some of these in your own organization. So the need for EI is now being backed up by a number of organizational studies where we have to address the emotional and social aspects of work. So a global leadership research company found that 20,000 new hires over 3 years, that 23% failed. Almost a quarter of those new hires failed because of a lack of ability to understand and manage emotion. So 25%. Now think about the cost of hiring someone, and then you've got 25% of people that fail because perhaps they're not able to manage and understand emotion. And then 9,000 new employees, 89% of those that failed due to interpersonal, attitudinal, or behavioral reasons over technical skills. So those interpersonal, attitudinal, behavior, those are EI related, but those were the failing reasons over technical skills. The Denning Center for Quality Management found that 50% of the time in business, time is wasted due to a lack of trust. Now, if we have emotional intelligence, we're likely to be more sensitive to building trust with others. So that's why that's important. The Forum Corp on Manufacturing and Services found that 70% of customers were lost, of lost customers, 70% were lost due to EI-related issues. So EI-related issues related to customer service. That's interesting. So you can see why there's more interest from companies to have emotional intelligence. And I want you to kind of be aware of these things because this is really going to connect with cultural intelligence as well. So in the Future of Jobs report, EI was ranked as one of the top 10 skills. This was echoed by McKinsey that reported and predicted that social and emotional skills would be increasingly essential for the future. Similarly, another report showed that EI was one of the fastest growing soft skills in the workplace and necessary. The World Economic Forum predicted that 42% of the current skills would be outdated by now, and emotional intelligence, leadership, and social influence would increase in demand. So EI is more important to our future than ever. The Harvard Business Review found that across key sectors, industry sectors, 98% of the companies saw emotional intelligence as important, along with a sense of purpose and, a desire for job satisfaction. And then research is showing that EI can be developed. So that's the really good news, that EI can be developed. So question I just want you to reflect on is we just went through all this factual data about EI is why is EI important to you? As you think about what we just shared, why is EI important to you and your future success? So think about that. And if you feel like chatting it in, we could take a look at it. So let's go on to our next slide, Jackie. Thank you. So now we're going to look at cultural intelligence. And cultural intelligence, I really like the definition here by Baluku, where he talks about culture as a set of common attitudes, customs, behaviors, and values shared by people with a common language, historical period, and geography. So interesting. Think about that. What is the chance that we live and work amongst people who were born into our same communities, where we share the same first language, birth year, and geography, or close to the same birth year? I mean, that is highly, highly unusual. It's extremely unlikely. Today, with the world around us, with our different organizations, we work with all different kinds of people, and it's exciting. So cultural intelligence is really we have to understand, the attitudes, customs, behaviors, and values of our own culture, and certainly be open to learning those in the cultures of others, because we are going to interact. Let's go on to that next slide. So according to Early, cultural intelligence reflects a person's adaptation to a new cultural setting, and so our ability to adapt and the capability to deal effectively with the people with whom we don't share that common background. Now, I think, Early, you're onto it, because that's more likely what the world is like for us. So cultural intelligence, it supports us with that sensitivity towards our own culture, but towards adapting our culture, and then towards being aware and engaging with another person's culture. Cultural differences create conflict. There's conflicting attitudes and perspectives. We have different customs and values. We behave differently. And so cultural differences can create conflict. I mean, so can personality differences, right? But now we're talking about culture. So cultural differences create conflict. And social settings can be interpreted very differently by people across different cultures, across different countries. Cultural intelligence is necessary today to really navigate our national and international workplace, our national and international team dynamics. It's very, very important. So let's, again, just like we did with emotional intelligence, let's kind of assess our own ability to adapt. So Jackie, would you go ahead and run that next poll? And what I want you to think about as you're looking at this poll is, am I able to adapt to new cultural settings to deal effectively with others who don't share my common cultural background? And, keep in mind, we're thinking about our different attitudes, our different customs, our different behaviors, our different values. So how adaptable am I? Do I strongly agree that I am? Do I strongly disagree? I'm not. I disagree. I'm not. I'm not sure. I am, so I agree. And I'm very, very able to adapt. So I strongly agree. Give that a few, 10 more seconds for those of you who are still weighing in. All right, Jackie, we can go ahead and hit end poll then and share the results. All right, so let's take a look at this. So, wow, none of us strongly disagree that we can't do this. I so appreciate that. There's about a quarter of us that we're not sure. So we're struggling with something. And that's a good awareness to have. Because many of us are there. Sometimes we're not sure. And so then, but about 61% of us agree that we are capable of doing this. And 13% of us strongly agree. So it's good for us to be aware of where we're at and consider that. So we can stop sharing that poll now. All right. So let's go to that next slide. Talk a little bit more. Yeah, there you go. About cultural intelligence. So I really like Livermore's model here and framework. He talks about these different strategic levels or 4 facets of cultural intelligence. And I think they're sort of progressive in the way they work. And I'm going to share some examples of them. I've had the opportunity to travel to India 3 times in my life so far, and I'd really love to go back. India is probably the opposite of American culture in a lot of ways. And so I'm going to use the example of driving in India as an example of how this plays out in my life, how this has played out in my life. Each of my 3 visits to India, I was there doing some training and development of leaders, and I was there for about a month, and I did not drive one single time. So this was more being driven in India, which is, in India, you have a lot of different types of vehicles on the road. You have, certainly cars and trucks and buses, but you also have a lot of motorcycles. A lot of people get around that way. And you might have the driver with a helmet on, and then he might have his wife on the back sitting side saddle with her sari, flowing in the wind that you're wondering, is that going to get caught in a spoke? And then she's holding their baby, and she's just holding on with one hand, holding the baby, and she might not have a helmet on. So you've got that. And then you've got animals on the road. And then you have you really don't have lanes. So everybody's kind of all over, pushing to get to the same area. And, there's a lot of beeping and noise because you're letting people know you're there. So it's very, very different than driving in the United States where we have lanes. We don't really beep unless there's more of an emergency. It's very, very different. So knowledge IQ or knowledge CI, cultural intelligence, recognizes how one's culture shapes thoughts, feelings, and behaviors towards a self and others. And so when I have knowledge, cultural intelligence, I'm kind of developing a self-awareness of my own culture and the culture of another. That's what knowledge is. So it's just starting to come into my knowledge. So here's my example of driving in India, where I had to recognize that driving in India, or I should say being driven, because I wouldn't even get behind the wheel of a car there. Being driven, and I forgot, you also have those, you have I forget what you call it, but it's where the rickshaw, somebody's pulling a rickshaw. You can have that on the road too. So, but I had to become aware that I was in a whole different setting, that I was used to driving in the United States, or I'd been in Europe in some different countries, but I was used to that kind of driving where there's lanes and more structure. And now I was in India and the driving was really different. And so I had to be aware of, I'm going through a knowledge adjustment here. And so I had to work through that because it was terrifying to me at first. So that was the culture of driving in India started to come into my awareness. That's where knowledge, cultural intelligence starts. And then interpretive cultural intelligence is the application of that knowledge to a cultural setting. So now I'm applying it, and that's where I'm doing interpretive. So my application was the facts about driving in India were different than my expectations. So I had to change my expectations. I had to adjust. I had to accept that sometimes we were driving down a mountain road that seemed like it was only one lane. But in India, one lane, it can be shared by two vehicles, even though you might feel like you're moving over so far, you're going to go over a cliff. But you know what? I'm here. I'm driving down the road. I need to accept it. Sometimes I had to close my eyes for a long time, hours, because it was terrifying to me. But I learned to expect it. And just go on the roller coaster ride in the car, in the vehicle. So I applied the knowledge to, my situation, and that's more interpretive cultural intelligence. And then we've got motivational cultural intelligence. So that's where, I developed the confidence to take a risk cross-culturally. And I did. I went back. Not only once after that, I went back twice. So I decided, to take that. I had enough confidence. I was going to take the risk. And even if I didn't have enough, I was going to build the confidence to go back. And so that's what motivational cultural intelligence is I take the confidence to take the risk, and I persevere. And so that's where the motivation comes in. So in India, I felt like I was taking a risk with my life while being there. There were mountain roads, there were harsh stops and starts, but I chose to take that risk and trust. And so that was motivational cultural intelligence. You see how this is a really nice breakdown that Livermore takes us on in this journey of the progression of cultural intelligence development. And then behavior. Behavior is I've obtained the knowledge, I've applied it through the interpretive side of it. I'm motivated to continue in the experience, the cross-cultural experience. So now those three are going to put enough pressure on me that it's going to change my behavior. So now I'm going to start moving towards, I'm going to start engaging more. I'm going to take actions that are sensitive to that culture. So I'm not going to complain in the car anymore about the driving. And I'm not. I'm going to accept it. I'm there. I've chosen. I'm going to trust. I'm going to take the risk, and I'm going to be there, and I'm not going to mention it. And I'm going to appreciate my experiences in the Asian Indian culture and accept the driving norms. And so that's what I've chosen to do. So that took me through the behavioral, where I actually changed my behavior, started changing what was coming up in my mind and changing what was coming out of my mouth. So considering and taking these 4 steps can help us to align with more culturally sensitive behavior. And it can help result in building those cross-cultural bonds and bridges and relationships. So as you think about, what Livermore is saying here, can you see where our self-awareness and our self-regulation are so important? We're going to look more at that on this next slide. So you can go ahead and go to that next slide, Jackie. So let's break this down a little bit and make that stronger connection. So we can see that self-awareness, self-regulation, they're necessary to acting on these 4 progressive strategic steps that Livermore offered, where, our self-awareness provides the ability to assess my own thoughts and feelings. So that's what helps me with the knowledge, CI. And then as I apply self-regulation to alter some of my stereotypes and my judgments, my attitudes, and even some of my reactions, then I'm able to apply the knowledge that I've gained. So I'm able to move into that interpretive step of cultural intelligence. And then as I look at my self-awareness and my self-regulation, now I'm aware where I'm confident or where I'm not confident, where I'm willing to take a risk, where I'm not willing to take a risk, and I can choose to be motivated and enter into the cultural setting. And it's a force. Believe me, I had to force myself to accept the way, the driving was happening. I had to force it, but I was so motivated to experience, the Indian people and the experiences. And I love that country. I love the people. They're so hospitable. I forced myself, and eventually, little by little, it's like my emotions came around and I was motivated to do it over time. And then also, the regulation then helped me make the behavioral switch so that I was acting more cross-culturally sensitive. So here's my comment to us today is, to me, it does not appear possible to be culturally intelligent without first achieving some level of self-awareness and self-regulation. And I love to talk about this topic because I'm truly concerned for us today that we're a little bit stuck around some of our diversity, equity, and inclusion movements and our cultural intelligence, because we're not recognizing how important developing our emotional intelligence is to moving things forward in our lives and in our communities. And so from what I can see, without emotional intelligence, it's pretty difficult to become culturally intelligent. So maybe a question that we might have now is, how do I capture the self-awareness and self-regulation that's necessary to cultural intelligence? Okay, couple things. This is what I suggest as I am able to coach people and coach myself, is it starts with listening. It starts with listening. And I may hear things I don't understand or I don't want to hear, but just listening opens us up, because as I listen to the different experiences of another person, it starts to change my heart. It starts to open me up. We don't have to agree with everything, but just listening starts to expand us. And then reflecting. So as we reflect on what they're saying, as we just try to get into their story and get into their way of seeing the world or seeing a situation, it starts to expand us. And as we let go of ourselves in that moment, not totally, but we let go of our own reactions and we start to, just listen and reflect back, then it really does change us. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. We just got a couple here, and then we're gonna totally get to our Q&A. So I'm suggesting that cultural intelligence adds to emotional intelligence by directing our self-awareness and self-regulation towards cultural sensitivity. So the cultural sensitivity includes the recognition of culture, interest in another's culture, empathy, my empathy toward another culture, and my compassion, and then my willingness to understand and engage. So that's what my self-awareness and my self-regulation are now moved towards that. One of the things we have to keep in mind is that the sensitivity, this cultural sensitivity, is focused on somebody's heritage. It's focused on their culture of origin, the present culture that they hold right now. How, if they're from another culture and in this culture, how is that impacting them, that change? And we need to come up with a presence of mind to be aware of what they're saying to us and be present, it can be so hard today. There's so many distractions, but cultural intelligence expands upon emotional intelligence by directing the specific sensitivities to one's cultural and cultural experience. So there has to be internal awareness and sensitivity to oneself in order to give sensitivity to others. So I have to be self-aware in order to turn my awareness to another. I also have to be self-regulated in order to give a regulation to the other as they're sharing. And so that's why our awareness of our own emotional intelligence is really important. And we can go on to the next slide. And this will be a few last comments before we get into our Q&A then. And this is something that I think is new to talk about today. But true cultural intelligence values one's culture along with the culture of others. No one culture can be esteemed over another. If I esteem another culture over my culture, my French heritage, my German heritage, my American heritage, if I make another culture better than mine or less than mine, I don't have true cultural intelligence. So this isn't about raising and valuing it. That's judgment. Putting a culture above mine is judgment. Putting a culture below mine is judgment. Cultural intelligence is truly valuing one's own culture along with the culture of another. And it's truly when I value my own heritage that I'm able to value the heritage of others. So this is something we have to keep in mind, that true cultural intelligence is really, paying attention to our own and then the culture of others. And it's truly in paying attention to my own history, my own values, my own customs, that I've been able to value those of another culture. Culture is not positive or negative. It just is. It's values, behaviors, customs. I mean, no culture is perfect. Another culture is it just is. So therefore, emotional intelligence, that self-awareness and self-regulation helps me to recognize if I'm overvaluing or undervaluing my own culture, and then potentially overvaluing or undervaluing another culture. And so that's very important for us to keep in mind. That's why the self-awareness and the self-regulation is important, because it helps me to stay even, non-judgmental, and move into the culture of another with, again, that even tone without judgment. So let's pause now, because I can tell we've got some questions and we've got some comments in the chat. So Jackie, we'll take those now.
Okay, so one question says, seems like cultural intelligence requires quote unquote local knowledge about specific cultures we work with. What are the best options to find this local knowledge?
Well, so I'm always an advocate of of doing, I like doing qualitative research. So I would just ask, usually I haven't had somebody who didn't want to explain, who they were, where they came from, what their roots were. And I would just ask someone, I would just say, hey, tell me more about your heritage. Like that's a very easy question because you're not, we all have a heritage. I live in the United States, but I have a French heritage. I have a German heritage. So that's a pretty safe question to ask about heritage. And then you can ask some questions more about that, follow-up questions. So that's one way. I mean, we have so many resources available to us, in terms of our libraries, our online libraries, even, YouTube can be a good resource that if you want to look up a specific heritage and learn a little bit more of the roots of it, you can. If you like watching videos, sometimes you might want to go to your library and find a video on it. Sometimes you might find some audio on it. I have done some audio series on different cultures to learn and to listen, and I've really enjoyed that while I've been driving. Or you can watch a video if you like to do that, or reading. So I hope that helps. What else do we have?
One other question that we have is, sometimes I get thrown into emotionally charged situations without warning. When you feel yourself getting worked up in a stressful situation, what tips or tricks do you use to be able to step back, gain perspective, and regulate?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. And that applies to a lot of different things, doesn't it? Whether it applies to just our day-to-day work or a cultural difference. It's easy to get charged up. And especially today, I mean, I think we're more and more stressed than ever. And so that stress just can bubble up, and then it comes out in surprising ways sometimes to us and to others around us. And I think to realize to realize that I don't actually have to respond to this situation right now. And sometimes I try to do this, sometimes I have so many things coming at me and so many people at one time. I mean, I don't even know how one person can take it. And so sometimes I'm just like, whoa, Jeanine, I have to bring it down, and I don't have to respond to everything and everything right now. And sometimes I put pressure on myself that is self-induced, where I want to respond right away because, well, if I don't respond right now, it's just, then there's going to be 10 to 20 more requests that are going to come in that are going to pile on top of each other. But, I think recognizing, am I in a good place to respond to this right now, or am I not in the best place? Am I going to say something or do something that I really don't want to say or do with a tone that I don't want to use? So I think just to just maybe listen and just pause and kind of work on ourselves in that moment, kind of care for ourselves. Like saying, I feel pressure right now, but I don't have to respond to this. And then we might even say to the other person, I'm going to have to think about this one. Let me get back to you in an hour, or let me get back to you tomorrow. I mean, it depends on the situation, the pressure, what's needed there. But to take a step back from something like that and feel like you can. But you can also, if you can be transparent enough to say, I'm struggling and I need to think through this more before I can give you my best answer. And try to get out of the situation. That might help bring some of the emotions down, give you a chance to think, so that you can come back with the way that you want to respond to that individual or that situation. That's generally how I try to handle that. And sometimes, depending on the situation, I might have to do a little bit of research to figure out like what's going on inside and why am I reacting to that. So that I try not to react out of a non-regulated person. See, that's the thing. We want to take that pause to be self-aware, and we want to take that pause to self-regulate. I hope that's helpful. What else do we have, Jackie?
We have one that says, thank you for a great presentation, Dr. Parolini. Is the process of acculturation a part of cultural intelligence without being judgmental?
So enculturation has that tone of one culture comes together with another, and we kind of come up with something new or different. Can you just read that again?
Yep. Is the process of acculturation a part of cultural intelligence without being judgmental?
Well, I mean, yes, for sure. I mean, because we need to think about those four aspects: the knowledge, the interpretive, the motivational, and the behavior. So that's going to happen as part of our cultural adjustment. And sometimes in that situation, it depends on what the enculturation is. If you're feeling like you just have to become like everybody else, that can be quite a bit to digest. And sometimes you might need to speak up about your own needs in that enculturation process. Like, for instance, I'm thinking about, I've been part of when one company purchased another company, and the company that was acquiring the other company didn't want to break down the other company's culture. But the way they ended up coming in and did their acquiring, they did just that. They just messed up the entire culture. And they weren't really willing to listen to what the acquiring culture was experiencing and why they were so successful. So they basically messed up their whole investment, And so even while the acquired culture is trying to speak up, if the culture taking over isn't willing to adjust, then that becomes difficult. But definitely being self-aware, being self-regulated through the process, speaking up, and recognizing those four levels and progressions of cultural intelligence could be important to that. We probably have time for another question if we have one.
This is sort of a paraphrase of our last one, but the question is, what does it mean to adapt, quote unquote, to another culture?
What does it mean to adapt to another culture? Well, it would mean that I need to be aware of I need to have the knowledge of my culture, the knowledge of the other culture. Then I'm going to have to choose to apply that knowledge and affect some of my behaviors, internal and external. And then I'm going to need to be motivated to bridge those differences. And then I'm also going to be willing to change my behaviors to do that. And so when I go to India, I mean, I still take my culture with me, but truly I listen more than I talk in India, unless of course I'm speaking, then I'm responsible for talk. But I listen a lot more than I talk. I'm very, very sensitive to everything going on around me and the people going around me. I really try to display very, very appreciative behaviors of the hospitality, because that's very important. So I really show appreciation, a lot more, because the hospitality is generally higher in India, and people are giving things that they are not able to necessarily afford. And so I really try to appreciate it. So I make some significant adjustments when I go over there, because I recognize I'm in a culture that is not, necessarily my own. And so I try to fit in more. But again, I'm going for a month. I'm not trying to live there. So let's go on to our next slide. And our next slide. Okay, we got to go beyond that. Go to the next slide. And the next slide. So I wanted you to be aware of the resources that I used. And again, Livermore is a really good resource. I like Baluku too, if you wanted to check into any of that. And if you did want a copy of our slides, we can get that to Jackie and you can reach out to her and she can send it. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So what I'd like you to think about is, what am I going to take with me today? You know, one thing can be a significant change personally and professionally. So what am I going to take and what am I going to do with it? That's really important. What am I going to do with the information that I'm learning today? And what I'd like to do, we're going to just take a moment to just share a little bit about the MBA, and then we'll do some prizes. So for those of you who are interested in the MBA, if you can go on to that next slide. This is the kind of things that we do in the MBA. This is what we talk about. This is what we apply to our lives. And if you're interested, you can talk with Lucas Hilberg. He's our MBA enrollment counselor. And there's his email and his phone number. And we can also get that to you. Jackie can get that to you if you want to email her too. And go on to that next slide. One of the things I'd like you to know is that we try to keep our MBA accessible to people. And so we try to be generous about giving credit. And so for those of you who might have a project management professional, or you've got a CPA, or some kind of professional certification that requires a bachelor's degree, then I can tend to give some graduate level credit for it. And so for these certifications in particular, it's almost a $6,000 savings. And so we have some other programs too. We just try to be helpful to you as a working professional and find ways to grant credit. You can go on to the next slide. So these are some places that are, we have students who work all over the place, but here's some places our students work. And go ahead and go on to that next slide. And then this is what we do for admission, is there's an application and we ask for some references, and I like to see your resume because I actually interview our applicants because I want to know what you want to do and where you've been in your career. And then we do a statement of purpose because we want to see where you want to go in your career. We want to align you with a professional coach that will help you get there. And we want to be a part of helping you get there. So go on to that next slide. Again, this is how you can contact Lucas if you have any questions. And we're going to draw a few prizes now. So Jackie, you can go on to that next slide if you want. Who's our first prize winner of which prize?
So our first prize winner is Josiah Hoagland. And he has won a Bethel University backpack, like the strappy kind, with a couple of Bethel water glasses.
Congratulations, Josiah. That's really nice. I use that backpack when I go to the state fair, and then you've got a couple plastic cups. So congratulations, and just reach out to Jackie there to make sure you get your prize. And then how about our second prize?
Our second prize winner is Scott Piercy, and he has won a Bethel keychain.
Oh, congratulations, Scott. Yay. One of our recent students. Welcome, Scott, to that. And you'll have a nice Bethel keychain. And then how about our third prize winner?
Our third prize winner is Lydia Shull, and she has won a Bethel journal.
Congratulations, Lydia, on the Bethel journal. And just, again, reach out to Jackie. And we're grateful that you were here today, and thanks for coming. We're going to do our next webinar in the fall. I think we're going to try to do something on artificial intelligence. So stay tuned for that one, and just really appreciate you being here. And just reach out if there's anything you need or if you want a recording of this. All right. Have a great day.